Hello everyone and welcome to the Winecast. Viewers of my last cast will know that I've got French wine on the brain at the moment and will have it there pretty solidly for the next couple of months while I work on a French wine related certification. Well, my philosophy has always been that if life gives you French wine to learn about, then you should make French wine casts, and that's what you're most likely to get from me for the next little while. Since I've already done casts on Bordeaux, Burgundy, the Rhône, Champagne, and Alsace, the logical candidate for the next cast is the Loire, which also happens to be what I'm in the thick of studying at the moment. The Loire, however, is a beast. It's large and a bit unruly, but it is easily divisible into smaller chunks, which is great because studying is keeping me busy and small, manageable bits is something I can do. Also, I'm always trying to keep my casts brief, believe it or not, so this will give me an added push in that direction. So, with all that in mind, let's get started on part one of what I hope will be a three-part series on the Loire Valley of France. The Loire Valley is one of France's most northerly wine regions, with only Champagne and parts of Alsace beating it out. It sits mostly between the 47th and 48th parallels north, which puts it in the same latitudinal ballpark as Seattle. That, fun fact, is a sister city to Nantes, the major municipality in the western end of the Loire, in the region that we're going to be looking at in this cast. Like I said in the intro, the Loire is a bit hard to get around as a concept. Like the northern and southern Rhône, it works better as an administrative idea than it does as a geographic reality. What geographic continuity it does have, it gets from the Loire River. Flowing for more than 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers from its headwaters in France's Massif Central, it runs through three primary regions that, though they share the river, have distinct histories and wine cultures. On its way to Orléans, where it will turn west, it flows north through the Upper Loire, home to several famous appellations like Puy-Fumé and Sancerre, based on Sauvignon Blanc and, to a lesser extent, Pinot Noir. West of Orléans, it passes through the Middle Loire, where it flows past the cities of Tours, Saumur, and Angers, that give their names to the subregions of Touraine, Saumur, and Anjou, famous for their wines based on, among other things, Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc. And before it empties into the Atlantic Ocean, the Loire passes by the city of Nantes in the lower Loire, where wines can be made from around a dozen grapes, but the most famous ones come from an otherwise obscure varietal called Melon de Bourgogne, or Muscadet. The Loire does do more than just unite these regions geographically, though, with probably its greatest gift to wine culture being the moderating effect that it has on the otherwise cool climate. Vineyards close to the Loire are typically a few degrees warmer than those farther away, and that can make a real difference in terms of getting grapes ripe in an area this far north. The valley created by the river also pulls in warm air from the Atlantic that helps to create a gradual spectrum of temperatures and climates between the lower Loire and the upper Loire, running from the maritime climate on the west end, with its moderate winters and summers, to the inland continental climate with its cold winters and hot summers. We'll look at each of these three regions separately, and let's start by tackling the one farthest west on the map, the Lower Loire, or the Pays Nantais. Named for its most important city, Pays Nantais means something like Nantes country, sort of in the way that Americans might say Basque country or Cajun country. It's divided into a number of appellations, the most extensive of which is Muscadet, that actually covers the entire Pays Nantais, and you should imagine all of the differently colored appellations you see on this map as sitting on top of the Muscadet appellation. It produces a wine called Muscadet, based on the Muscadet or Melon de Bourgogne grape, making it a bit of an anomaly in France because wines and wine regions in France are rarely named after their grapes. Though it's large, remember it does cover the entire Pays Nantais, only about 20% of all Muscadet wine is produced using this appellation, with much more coming from three sub-appellations: Muscadet Côte de Grandlieu, Muscadet Coteaux de la Loire, and the big dog, Muscadet Sèvre et Maine, that contains within it three crus, or classified growth areas: Clisson, Gorges, and Le Palais, that aren't separate AOCs, but that are more highly regulated than their parent appellation and are highly regarded for their quality. The area also has three other sets of appellations and sub-appellations that are not based on the Muscadet grape: Gros Plant du Pays Nantais, the Fief Vendéen, and Coteaux d'Ancenis. These are interesting appellations that deserve respect in their own right, but they aren't easy to find outside of France, and the average consumer outside of that country isn't likely to run into them very often. So let's talk about them only briefly before turning our attention back to the Muscadet appellations. Gros Plant du Pays Nantais is based on the Fol Blanche grape that's also known as Gros or Big Plant, in honor of its vigor and ability to produce large yields. Like a lot of high-yielding grapes, Fol Blanche isn't known for its complexity and character and generally produces still wines that are neutral in flavor and a bit tart. They do make a good pair with seafood and can be aged sur lie, which we'll talk about in a minute, to give them a little extra punch and complexity. But this grape is actually more widely used in brandy production, where its neutral character makes it a good candidate for distilling. In fact, it owes a lot of its presence in the Loire to Dutch traders who encouraged plantings of it, as well as Muscadet, another neutral grape, precisely so that they could distill it into brandy. The Coteau d'Ancenis produces reds, whites, and rosés, and currently the reds can be made from Gamay and Cabernet Franc, while the whites can contain Chenin Blanc and Pinot Gris. Chenin Blanc, which is called Pinot de la Loire in these parts, is being phased out as a grape and will be gone from the white wines as of 2017, as will the Cab Franc from the reds and rosés as of 2025, leaving only whites, which will be off-dry, made from Pinot Gris, which is also called Malvoisie in this region, and reds and rosés made from Gamay. Finally, the Fief Vendéen are technically south of the Pays Nantais and are 5 non-contiguous production areas making whites, reds, and rosés based on Chenin Blanc, Cabernet Franc, Gamay, and Pinot Noir. The wine that the Pays Nantais is most famous for, though, is Muscadet, and as we covered, that's produced throughout the region under 4 appellations. What unites them is their use of the Muscadet or Melon de Bourgogne grape in their wines. As its name suggests, Melon de Bourgogne, or just Melon, came to the Loire from Burgundy, where it wasn't making much of a splash because, from a flavor and aroma standpoint, it's a bit of a snoozer. After a particularly brutal winter in 1709 killed off a large number of vines in the region, this grape was brought in for its ability to grow in abundance, and its planting was encouraged by the Dutch traders we mentioned in connection to Fol Blanche, who saw an opportunity for brandy production in a high-yield, neutral grape. The wine it produces is very simple and very neutral, as well as crisp and easy drinking. In the Pays Nantais, wines made from Muscadet often show a saline or salty quality that probably has to do with the proximity of the vineyards to the sea air that funnels in from the Atlantic down the Loire. Thanks to these characteristics and to its ability to play well with sur lie aging, Muscadets are considered a great pair with seafood and a truly classic pair with oysters. Speaking of sur lie aging, this wine-making technique is widely used to make Muscadets, though there are ones made that don't use it. If you remember the cast on traditional method sparkling wines, sur lie aging is the technique of letting the wine sit on the dead yeast cells that are present after fermentation. The cells break down through a process called autolysis and release compounds that give the wine a toasty, bready, or nutty character. In sparkling wines, this process happens in the bottle, but in still wines like Muscadet and others, the process happens during barrel or tank aging, and the effects of it can be intensified by disturbing or stirring the lees during aging to encourage the release of more flavor compounds, a process called batonnage. Sur lie aging is not a ticket to success for all wines because the nutty, yeasty flavors and aromas that it produces aren't necessarily the great friends of other flavors and aromas found in wines. But in very neutral wines, like the base wines for sparklers or wines made from grapes like Muscadet and Fol Blanche, they can be a decided plus since the compounds from the lees add complexity and character to the wine, and their unique flavors can be appreciated in the absence of other flavors to clash with. Also, lees left in the barrel during aging will coat the inside of the barrel and partially seal it from oxygen, cutting down on oxidation during aging and thus protecting the wine. All 4 of the Muscadet appellations may do sur lie aging and indicate this on the bottle when they use that process. Wines bottled under the 4 main appellations, though, may only do sur lie within a limited time window, and if the words sur lie appear on the bottle, the wine was required to have been bottled between the beginning of April and the end of November of the year after it was harvested. However, the three cru in Muscadet Sèvre Maine have stricter aging requirements for Sur-Lie than do the appellations, with Clisson and Gorges requiring a minimum of 24 months of sitting on the lees before bottling, and Le Palais requiring 17 months, with producers free to age beyond that. In spite of the stricter requirements, though, wines from the three cru cannot, by law, use the term Sur-Lie on their labels, presumably since their aging requirements conflict with the requirement to bottle within a year or so of harvest. For the sake of visual reference, here are a couple of labels. On the left, you have a bottle of Muscadet Sèvre Maine, which is the appellation which you're most likely to run into from Muscadet, especially outside of France. And you can see on the label that it's been aged Sur-Lie. By contrast, on the right, the label for the Clisson cru from the same appellation won't say that it was aged Sur-Lie, even though it was, and the requirement was longer than for the bottle from its parent appellation. Producers in the three cru, Clisson, Gorges, and Le Palais, are pretty proud of their cru designations, so expect bottles from there to really emphasize their place of origin, like this one does. Thanks for joining me for part 1 of the Loire Valley, and next week, barring accidents, we'll hit the Middle Loire. I hope this cast was helpful, enjoyable, and informative, and if it was, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the comments that a lot of you have been leaving lately, and I hope to hear more from everyone. And please follow me on Instagram at UnknownWinecasterDrinksWine, as that's an especially good platform to communicate with me on. I'm your host, the Unknown Winecaster, and I'm out. Enjoy the grape, but always enjoy it responsibly.